What do I owe you? Nothing. It's for free. Free?
What's going on, everybody? It's Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. We are here with our very 76th episode of the Dockery Docket. I'm excited to be here, and I hope that you are excited to be here as well. And if you are excited to be here as well, make sure to click the like button and also the subscribe button. So, unless you live under a rock, you probably already know that America has probably experienced one of the worst foreign policy failures in my lifetime. And for some of you who may be older, wiser than me, this may remind you of the time when America decided to leave Vietnam. There have been a lot of memes going around about this, and the comparisons are actually very stunning and very similar. But if we look at the situation that is happening right now, we can see that Afghanistan went through a terrible, horrible situation. As people were running down the tarmac trying to get to this airplane and try and hang on to leave. Some people were still hanging on to the landing gear when the plane actually took off. And when the plane did take off, the speed was too much for them, and their bodies tumbled to the ground. It was even reported by a news agency that the airplane found human remains in the wheel well. All of this seems extremely grim. Now, I can't sit here and be like, well, we should have done this, and we should have done that. I'm just some random guy on the internet. I do believe that something different could have been done to sort of make sure that something like this wouldn't have happened. I just want you to know that I am not a foreign policy expert. I'm not an expert on military situations, but neither is Joe Biden, apparently, and we will learn that in this entire episode. Now, my political brain has been wheeling around ever since the Taliban decided to take over Afghanistan again, and ever since Joe Biden decided to make a speech about the situation on the ground in Afghanistan. Surprisingly, there were some things that I agreed with in Joe Biden's speech. As Joe Biden made clear in his speech that we have been in Afghanistan for 20 years, and we have been successful in a lot of things. We killed Osama bin Laden, we stopped a lot of terrorism, and we also created a new government that supposedly just fell to the Taliban. But anyway, Joe Biden is right. This was a war that was endless, and it needed to end at some point. As Joe Biden said that this war has happened under 4 presidents, and he doesn't want to pass it on to another president. This is true, and I will tell you right now that I'm not a fan of these endless wars, and I wish that they didn't exist and we could bring all the troops home at once. However, if this pullout of troops was a lot better than what it actually was, then I would have been happy that we were leaving. But because it was such a big failure, there is nothing that we can do right now but blame Joe Biden and the administration for this miscalculation. As I just said, there were things that I agreed with in this speech, and there were also things that made me absolutely sick to my stomach. Now, in this speech that Joe Biden gave, he decided to blame everyone except himself. He blamed the Afghan fighters. He blamed regular Afghan citizens. And of course, he decided to blame Donald Trump. As in the speech, Joe Biden said, when I came to office, I inherited a deal cut by my predecessor, which he invited the Taliban to discuss at Camp David on the eve of 9/11 of 2019, and left the Taliban in the strongest position militarily since 2001, and imposed a May 1st, 2021 deadline on U.S. forces. So, listen, I will tell you right now, some of this is true. Trump did have a deal to get troops out of Afghanistan. And yes, it was with the Taliban. However, Joe Biden did not follow along with the agreements of this agreement that Donald Trump had, as the Trump administration made clear that they would only leave if the Taliban followed different guidelines. Some of these commitments were for the Taliban to stop making Afghanistan a safe haven for Al-Qaeda. Along with this, the former Trump administration also said that they wouldn't have followed through with the plan to leave if the Taliban didn't follow through or without having final talks with the Taliban. Now you might be thinking, Kyle, the Taliban is a terrorist organization. How could the Trump administration trust them? Well, to be honest, they only needed to trust them for a little while because, well, they can't be trusted. But we had to make sure that our people could get out. Not just the soldiers, but the American citizens and our allies that were stationed on the ground, as there were Afghan citizens that were translators for these American soldiers that needed to be rescued because if they stayed there and the Taliban found out that they were working for the American government, then more than likely they're signing their own death warrant. So if we had an agreement in place that said, hey, we're going to leave our troops, but you Taliban need to stay back, then this situation wouldn't have been as bad. As right now, we have American citizens and people that were helping us behind enemy lines, and they are getting killed. And if they are women, guess what? They are getting raped by the Taliban. It's just absolutely terrible. Joe Biden ripped the Band-Aid off too fast and wanted to leave right away. So that's what we did. He didn't follow Trump's plan at all. Also, this idea that Joe Biden had to follow along with Trump's order is very, very stupid. We remember when Joe Biden came into office, he signed 400 executive orders to get rid of Donald Trump's agenda. Why couldn't he have just done that for this situation? The important thing to remember with this whole situation is that all of this should be on Joe Biden, as he's the president, and he didn't have to leave the way that he did. But because we left the way that we did, we didn't have time to assess the situation, which led to our embassy being overrun, and now the Taliban has millions and millions of dollars in American military equipment. That's right. As right now, America is technically paying the Taliban. As once the American government and the Afghan government left or fell, guns and weapons were still just sitting there. And the Taliban were like, hey, Merry Christmas to us, thanks. As according to my sources, the Taliban captured an array of modern military equipment, some of them including a combat aircraft, 900 guns, 30 light tactical vehicles, and 20 army pickup trucks. These numbers of weapons continued to grow as the Taliban moved and looked over the country. As the Taliban would go into a city, and the Afghan government wouldn't even fight them, so they just took the weapons. Here is a very shocking video from NBC News showing all the weapons that are still wrapped. Brand new weapons just given away for free.
Are on the march and gaining territory at an astonishing rate. We're the first foreign journalists to see the latest army base the Taliban have captured in the province, and they want to show us the treasure trove of military riches they've seized with it. Many of these boxes supplied by the Americans hadn't even been opened before the Taliban got hold of them.
RPG. Whoa.
Can anyone believe that the Taliban wants peace when you've got all these weapons now?
Most of the time we don't rely on all of this, we just rely on Allah. But it does help us a lot, and it's given us a lot of new weapons we can use in battle. Of course we want peace. All people want peace here, but the government doesn't want peace with us.
From this base alone, the Taliban say they seized about 900 guns, 30 Humvees, and 20 army pickup trucks.
Can you believe this? This is not millions of dollars in taxpayer money, but it is billions of dollars in taxpayer money that is being used to fund the Taliban, which is a terrorist organization. One of my favorite moments of this whole situation was when someone asked Jake Sullivan, who is a national security advisor, if the Taliban would give our weapons back to us. And this idiot said, the White House believes that the Taliban won't return U.S. weapons that it captured from Afghan forces. Wow! We have Sherlock Holmes over here on this case. Look at Captain Obvious over here. Of course they aren't gonna give these weapons back, you idiot. They got them for free. It's basically like Christmas. Okay, I'll admit that was a little bit harsh, but I want you to understand just how huge this situation is. We leave, and the Afghan government that we built for the last 20 years topples to the ground. The people that we don't want to take control of the country take control of the country with our weapons. Then they start shooting people in the streets, killing civilians, and even American citizens just because they may be Christians or have worked with the American government. The mission that we should be focused on right now is getting these people out before the Taliban gets to them. As I already said, if the Taliban gets to them, then they are dead. This is why so many people were clinging onto the airplane while it was leaving, because they knew that this was going to happen to them. They knew that they were going to be killed by the Taliban. And according to John Kirby, who is a spokesperson for the Pentagon, said that the U.S. military, that's right, we had to send in more military after we already pulled out the military. Anyway, the military has evacuated 7,000 people from Kabul. This is a pretty good number, and hopefully we will get more people out. The question that you are probably wondering is how many people are still there? How many people are still behind? How many people need to be evacuated? Well, John Kirby answered this question by saying, I don't know. Despicable. Now, I think that there is reason to believe that this mission could have been avoided, whether it be from Joe Biden saying, hey, let's push back the date a little bit, or other military leaders telling Joe Biden that we needed to keep some troops on the ground to make sure that the government of Afghanistan is strong enough to hold off an attack from the Taliban. I know, I understand that we've been doing that for 20 years, but still having a small force could have been helpful to keep the peace. Maybe even for a little bit, like a month, just to make sure that we were able to get all of our men and women out. Then the military could leave, and then we could be done. The thing about the United States military is that we have people all over the world. We have 800 military bases in more than 70 countries. We have these different bases to make sure that the countries stay peaceful, and also to protect our interests in that country and also abroad. Like, we have a military base in Germany, we have one in Japan, we have one in England, we have one all over the world. We have different embassies everywhere. And this is to protect us from different situations. Like, for example, if a situation broke out with Taiwan and China, which we will talk about more later, then the US can keep an eye on them because we have a military base in South Korea, which I think is the closest. Correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments section, and while you're down there, you might as well subscribe and hit the like button. Anyway, the question is, how could have all this have been avoided? Was there any writing on the wall that told the government that the Taliban could come right in right away and hurt our allies? Well, according to Mark White Rage Milley, he said that he wasn't aware of any intelligence reports indicating the Afghan military and government would collapse in just 11 days. That's right, 11 days. It was expected by him and many other generals that the Afghan military would fend off the Taliban for a few months or even years. Joe Biden even said something like this a few months ago, in a now famous clip where he claimed that leaving Afghanistan would be nothing like the United States leaving Vietnam. Just take a listen to this.
Some Vietnamese veterans see echoes of their experience in this withdrawal in Afghanistan. Do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam, with some people feeling...
None whatsoever. Zero. What you had entire brigades breaking through the gates of our embassy. 6, if I'm not mistaken. The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. They're not remotely comparable in terms of capability. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of a embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comparable.
I mean, look at this picture right here. I mean, they are the exact same picture. So, while Mark White Rage Milley and Joe Biden were on the same page that the Taliban would not have ever taken over, there were people on the ground in Afghanistan warning Americans that what is happening now was going to happen. As last month, U.S. diplomats wrote a memo to Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, and told him that the Afghan government would collapse quickly. Nearly 24 diplomats signed this memo, and they urged the United States government to start giving out visas to Afghans and start an evacuation plan. They sent this on July 13th, and the evacuation officially started on August 1st, when the Taliban was already taking over many cities. So we have a lot of conflicting stories here. Some were saying that there was no way that the Taliban could take over, and others were saying we better get out and we better look out for the Taliban. The people that were saying look out were correct. So what did Joe Biden know before he ordered the withdrawal of these troops? Well, according to Axios, he knew quite a lot. As while the plan was being created, many military and intelligence officials told Mr. Biden that security was deteriorating in Afghanistan, and they expressed concerns both about the capabilities of the Afghan military and the Taliban's likely ability to take over major Afghan cities. However, Joe Biden went along with it anyway, and it was a terrible display. It was a terrible situation. The sad thing is that all of this could have been avoided if Joe Biden would have listened to his generals, but he didn't, and now many people are suffering. And the reason why I believe that Joe Biden didn't listen to his generals is very simple. Joe Biden is a one-term president that is trying to make a name for himself before he leaves. I can imagine in the future, maybe in the 2024 election, when all of this calms down, there will be political ads being like, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris bravely took us out of endless wars. Even though Kamala Harris is nowhere to be found, and Joe Biden blamed everyone but himself, the media will probably say that this is a beautiful success story and everything will just be perfect and peachy. And what I say to that is don't let them lie to you. Because this situation that we saw has a domino effect, which is a very simple concept. If one domino falls, then the next one will fall. And then the next one will fall, and so on and so forth. And there's nothing that you can do when you're next in line. Anyway, the dominoes are falling when it comes to China. As once this whole situation happened, the Chinese sort of swooped in, and now they might create a pipeline between the two countries, even though China has literal concentration camps for Muslims in China. With this pipeline, more than likely, China will become super rich from it. China also says that they will recognize the Taliban as the official government of Afghanistan. Along with this, Russia wants to get more involved in Afghanistan as well, along with India. What America did when they left was create a vacuum, and now other countries are coming in to fill in that vacuum. This means more money for them and more influence for them in that region, while the US just sits back and hopes that maybe this time the Taliban will be peaceful. Sadly, they won't. Now, this is just one domino that is falling, but there are more dominoes that are going to start falling soon. As once again, after this event happened, the Chinese state media sent out a message to the country of Taiwan that said, from what happened in Afghanistan, those in Taiwan should perceive that once a war breaks out in the Straits, the island's defense will collapse in hours and US military won't come to help. As a result, the DPP will quickly surrender. This is a scary statement from China, as it says once a war breaks out, not if a war breaks out. We have known for a very long time that China wants to take over Taiwan, and they've wanted to do this for a very long time, as they believe that Taiwan is a part of China when it actually isn't. The question here that we must ask is, if China does attack Taiwan, will the United States come in and help? Or is China right and the United States just leave Taiwan alone and let China take over? Well, from what we saw from Afghanistan, I don't think that the United States wants to get in a war, especially with China. So they might just take Taiwan, which will once again make America look like a bunch of backstabbers to our allies. Along with this, we could see another domino fall as Russia could just walk right in and take over the Ukraine by force, just like they did in Crimea. The US might not even raise a finger in both of these situations. We can see that this whole Afghanistan situation has made the entire world see the United States as weak and not very good at standing up with their allies. We are seen as weak to the world, and we are also seen as spineless because we have a president that is also weak and spineless that made a terrible decision, not to pull out of Afghanistan, but to pull out without a plan that ended up making the United States look stupid and terrible on the world stage, that, as we talked about, could lead to some terrible consequences. We are starting to see more and more that this administration is crumbling from top down. We are experiencing a record inflation rate, which will only get worse because Joe Biden thinks that we can just print money out of nothing. We have an immigration situation that Kamala has still not fixed. We are seeing COVID spike around the country, and of course, we have Joe Biden's idiot son banging hookers and having laptops stolen. It is ridiculous how many crises this presidency has gone through, and the media is like, oh my goodness, look at him, he's just so brave and wonderful. He's not brave. He's an old fool that should resign as president because he has failed to show leadership. Right now, instead of hoping and praying that the Taliban will let us get our citizens out, Joe Biden should get on TV and demand the Taliban let us through. And if not, then we will bomb them hard. Yes, that seems rough, but we have to understand that these people that took over Afghanistan are evil. They are pure evil, as we must remember that it was the Taliban that created a safe haven for Al-Qaeda, which was led by Osama bin Laden, who was behind the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which was the reason that we got into the Afghan war in the first place. So it's like a full circle. Now these people are back in power, and we will have to see what happens next, as new information is coming out every single day about this whole situation. And to me, it is just pathetic. In the end, this episode is not me advocating for more war in the Middle East. It is actually the opposite. I am glad that we are starting to end these different endless wars. But, once again, it is the way that we got out that makes me bitter. All of these veterans that lost a leg, or an eye, a best friend, or even their lives, in the end, did it all for nothing. As in 11 days, all their hard work was swept away. It is sad, really. And I pray for those veterans of this war. And I pray for the people that are still on the ground begging to be sent out of the country. Literally trying to throw their babies over a wired fence so they can be saved. Christians are being hunted down in the streets and killed. Along with that, if you have a daughter over the age of 12, she now belongs to the Taliban. And if you actually have a daughter that's under that age, you have to put an X on your doorpost. It is all just horrific stuff. And all of this should tell us that incompetence is not a good leadership trait. And that I would rather have a president that wrote a mean tweet every single day than have a man of confusion that will probably single-handedly destroy our country. Just continue to pray for America as we go through this absolute mess. And with that, I just want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Dockery Docket. And until next time, like my mom always says, be good, be kind, be loving, goodbye.